The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Podcast. It's another edition of The Big Issue. And of course, as usual, with me here in the studio are our very, very vibrant analysts, Silas Ezego.
Thanks for being here.
And Chibuzo Kaibe.
Thank you.
And of course, without taking much of your time, we are going into the very big issue of the day, which is e-transmission of results, as Senate bows to the will of Nigerians. The Senate on Wednesday overturned the version of the Electoral Act Bill it earlier passed by amending it to allow the Independent National Electoral Commission to decide the mode of election conduct and transmission of election results in the country. The senators recommitted the bill for more legislative work, and after much debate, they amended clause 52(3), which now allows INEC to determine the mode of election conduct and the transmission of election results. Of course, we know that there had been controversy trailing the mode of transmission of election results. And of course, the civil society organizations and the umbrella body of political parties in Nigeria, IPAC, had opposed the Red Chamber for passing a bill that restricts INEC from deciding the mode of election and the transmission of its result. Well, Silas, looking at the controversy that had trailed this bill, what would you say? A sudden change of mind. How would you describe the idea of the Red Chamber reversing itself?
Well, I would like to say that it's never too late to bring yourself from the brink. Okay, once it's called that you are going the wrong tangent, you are going off target, and you realize it at the point. It's never too late to say let's beat the retreat. So I think what the state did is to look at what position have taken, look at it legally and politically, and spot that it's not something they could sustain. Okay, and they said, okay, like the House of Reps had a better grasp of the situation. And they said, okay, let's
learn from our colleagues in the Green Chamber.
Let us agree with them that this is the best interest, this is the best thing for the RPL and for the country. So it's never too late to when you find out you are on the wrong way. Once you find out you are wrong, you should always find a way to come back.
Yes,
because the thing has been allocate to Nigerians. Well, from the mood of Nigerians. They even say the part of the mood of Nigerians.
Okay.
So they scored that they were on a different plane from the rest of Nigeria.
Of the Nigerians.
So it's good that they do that.
Well, Chibuzo, most Nigerians have applauded the distinguished senators for being distinguished enough to have bowed to the whims of Nigerians by reversing itself on the bill. So it moves from the lawmakers. I think it's very rare in this part of the globe. You understand? So should we say our nascent democracy is growing by the day by this action?
Okay, applauding them that they did what? Applauding who?
The senators that they bowed.
This is something they needn't have to drag us through. This whole drama about
e-transmission results,
doing the U-turn and all of that wasn't necessary in the first place.
Of course, let's just give it to them for the fact that they were able to come.
I'm coming on the premise of that for them to be seen as heroes in this whole narrative. That is where I have a problem with, because as it stands now, they appear to
stealing the show,
be the ones who take the glory for what has happened. But they have no say in this because the momentum has gone past them. They are only trailing the narrative, as it were. The people who deserve to be commended for what has happened are the civil society and the opposition lawmakers
and political
in
parties.
The Senate, especially, and the political parties. No, not even the political parties, because the way they voted on this particular clause was along partisan lines. Only about one or two lawmakers from the APC voted to the contrary. But all of the other APC members voted along the same line. of no to e-transmission. So the people who should take glory for what has happened, the civil society, the media, and
Individual
political
Nigerians.
parties.
Political parties.
So
And even individual Nigerians who spoke
Yes.
up.
spoke up against it. So
especially the opposition People's Democratic Party.
well, so for me, the lawmakers who are beating a retreat now are only pursuing the narrative, like I said earlier. And it shows that if Nigerians can continue to hit on issues like this and put their feet on the on the throttle to ensure that things like this happen, there is no stopping them from achieving, But how significant is this? I think that is what Nigeria should be looking forward to. It is not enough to have the e-transmission now in place. The e-transmission is not an end in itself. It is a process. The end result in all of this is to ensure that we have a very credible electoral process that will engender confidence and ensure that people come out and trust the system, because that is the only way people can own and see themselves as part of government. And the end result of that, in some way, is an improvement in governance based on the need, the improved perception of accountability, because the people now will be involved in governance. So I think, well, let's see how this, pans out from here.
Well, Silas, you're listening to Chibuzo. Chibuzo is insisting that the lawmakers have nothing to
let me qualify
partake.
that.
I
Let me
understand.
qualify
They
that.
have to partake in terms
No,
of.
no, not all the lawmakers. It would be unfair to group all the lawmakers in that basket.
Yeah, it's true.
There were
You say
those who, from the onset,
the opposition.
yeah.
Can
So I think
understand.
it's proper to put that in
You are
place.
right. So he is now saying that the lawmakers cannot just, because you see, they came out after taking the action. They came out yesterday. They took that decision because they had to bow to the whims of Nigerians. And at the end of the day, from the way Senate spokesman was talking it yesterday, you will know that they were now posturing like the proverbial Agama lizard who fell from a high roko tree to the ground and nodded his head and say he felt entitled to praise itself, even if no one else did. And they did that. And of course, don't forget that prominent Nigerians like even INEC, the electoral umpire, River State Governor Wike, former Vice President Atiku, all commended the lawmakers. For Chibuzo, one nothing to take.
The thing is, I can speak to Chibuzo's ants, okay? Not just him. Most of us in the public space were very, very angry, disappointed with the senators for those who were, in quotes, trying to be stumbling blocks to the democratic process. And especially when we know that for a long time, the vote had been an object of attack by those who want to are so desperate to get into power at all costs. So when this the way of e-transmission came on and what they can confer on the system, some level of credibility, reduction of violence, ensuring that the right candidate, the people's choice emerges, which has not been the case all this while. So when we saw, what it can confer on the system, and these senior lawmakers, I'll call them senior, not because they have a senior chamber. Most of them there are old men who have seen that place as a place of retirement in politics and for higher office, are now taking us back. Taking us back. So I can feel his anger, but with me, I want to say that, well, since we have achieved what we want to achieve, the goal was to get the information. All those shenanigans on the way are part of the story of it. Okay, in the end, the people will prepared, and they cannot be saying that representing the people when the people are saying yes and are saying no.
They're saying something different.
I'm sure that they will listen and say, "Look, if you continue being against this movement, like you said, the risk being there behind." So I don't want to be too harsh on them. They're fine. We have got what we're looking for. Everybody knows what role everybody played. Let us move ahead from here and show that this e-transmission actually gives us what we are expecting to give us.
But at
Because we've
least-
not reached there yet, so not even tried it yet.
Mm.
Not to see that this transmission gives us what we want to get. So
At
that we can
least-
be sure that our vote counts.
I think you can live agree that whatever the case is, it shows that our nascent democracy is waxing stronger and
It's
stronger.
moving, pressure.
By the day, very good. Beyond the fact that Nigerians have been demanding for e-transmission of result, which the Senate rejected earlier, why did the Senate reverse itself? Because these are lawmakers. No, but first of all, Chibuzo, look at it. These are lawmakers who came out putting a very strong argument that in their constituency they don't have a communication network for such transmission to go through successfully. That was the argument, that most of their constituencies are remote areas where such networks does not exist. So how can a transmission of election result, of course, how can transmission of election result happen successfully in some of those remote areas? That was the argument. All of a sudden, the lawmakers changed their mind. Wait, is it that something has changed, or all of a sudden the network, the network providers have been able to bring network in those constituencies? That is why they changed their mind.
Well, before I jump on that, I omitted another very critical stakeholder in this whole discourse that ought to be properly celebrated on this, and that is INEC. It is very commendable and bold of INEC to have made a position clear that they have the capacity and the ability to do a transmission. I think that singular posture of the institution whose responsibility it is to manage this process was major and massive. And I think if any other person deserves a lot of commendation on why we have arrived at this point, it is INEC. Shame to the NCC, because when they needed to step up, they were dilly-dallying about it. But that said, back to the lawmakers, the senators particularly, who all of a sudden are now seeing things the way they ought to be, the way they ought to have seen it. Well, they only have themselves to. I think they should be the ones to explain how they had a 360 turnaround on this matter. Well, of course, they will tell you we went back to our constituents and we interfaced with them and they convinced us, because of course they represent people, and they convinced us that, but I do think that when they saw the groundswell of opposition and angst by Nigerians to their position, it was very evident.
Well, sorry, Chibuzo, for cutting you short. We'll be going for a short break now. Before we come back, we'll just come back directly to that very point we are discussing. And of course, we just have to take a short break so that at the end of the day, we will even help inform our viewers that they should help in shaping this conversation by sending their comment, contributing by their way of comment. So that at the end of the day, we'll be able to understand the minds of Nigerians out there. Put your opinion before them so that they will understand how you feel too. That is why your comment on this matter is very important. Let's go for a short break. We expect that as we come back, your comments will begin to pour in as we discuss the matter. Don't go offline. We'll be back in a moment.
The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Welcome back. You're still on the Big Issue in Leadership Podcast. And of course, the big issue of the day is e-transmission of results and the bowing of the Senate to the whims of Nigeria. So back to what we were saying, Chibuzo, I think what we were discussing was that the same senators that said they are not going to endorse electronic transmission of results because in their constituencies, most of their constituencies, there are no communication network. All of a sudden, they have just turned around now to give a nod by passing, re-amending the bill in a way that it now covers e-transmission of results. Is it that all of a sudden the network, the service providers have brought network to their constituency, or is it that they actually bow to the whims of Nigerians? What actually changed? That is what we are discussing here. Is it a result of pressure from the people or other hidden reasons for such change? It's also lurking in the dark.
Well, my immediate hunch would be that they saw the backlash that their position, had, and so they had to beat a retreat and make this U-turn. But again, it could also mean so many things because one would now have to question their sincerity. I am sorry I have to drag it that far. Because if they could beat such a retreat within what space of time now? That thing was done in July. And July up to now,
August,
they had to
September,
beat a retreat based on the kind of arguments they made. Some people said they don't even have signal in their villages. Very interesting narrative. So one would want to know what has actually. I think they still have a need to. They will be in the best position to, give.
But they gave the explanation now. You didn't hear them. They said they took that decision because they had to bow to the will of Nigerians.
So they had to jettison their own arguments. So it is
Which was based on the fact that
for those
the process itself will not be too competent enough to give the required results. Because if you can't transmit results from remote areas, then at the end of the day, this now contributes in marring the electoral process. That's their own position. So how come they are now beginning to reason that the e-transmission of results will not mar the electoral process?
When it comes to we have this kind of notion among judges about the judges in Nigeria that they can write two results, both correct. I don't know which one they want to give. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. So a judge can give you two correct judgments on an issue and defend it to the last point. Okay? So those people, the senators who oppose this petition, if they want to have a good argument, they can always get a good argument. And stand by it. It's possible. But you have to look at what's the intention. And to the intention of the argument that Nigerians are questioning. If INEC has said we can do this is where we are, all of a sudden. And so let me come to the point you are asking. It's possible that they have looked at the legal implications of going with that bill. First of all, is that you cannot remove the power of INEC to decide how election is done. The Constitution and the INEC, the Act gives INEC the authority to decide how to conduct an election. And you are trying to make a law that removes that. It only takes after the election for someone to go to court and invalidate everything you've done. In fact, someone will just go to court and make this law and tell this law, go to judicial interpretation, and they declare this law null and void because it contradicts the original function of INEC. How can you say INEC will now begin to take permission, authorization from another body, an agency of the government,
Nigerian
and it says it is independent? National Communication Commission, which is not even on the power of INEC in terms of grading.
But the question, I raised the question of sincerity in the first place. These are lawmakers. Most of them are former governors. Is it not shocking that they wouldn't see this as you are painting it now, and they still went ahead to infuse this thing into the law? Don't forget, the introduction of the e-transmission, the whole introduction of the e-transmission saga was a function of protests by civil society before it was even included. And while it was included, they had to fix that clause. So it shows, it comes down to intent, like you rightly pointed out, and a question of their sincerity from the get-go. And that is where it concerns me now that all of a sudden they are victim. Of course, the legal issues, they would have been aware. They would have been aware that you can't take an authority from a body that has a responsibility of doing this.
Constitutional responsibility.
And is considered to be independent.
And that is where it is more concerning now. And like I said in my opening, this is a process in itself. Now that we have this part of it in the law, those who have been recognized to do what have been accorded their responsibility. It behoves on every Nigerian to remain alert, because for people to just beat a retreat like that, there is no telling what other options they have in front.
Yes.
You really don't trust. You really don't trust lawmakers.
Of course.
Well,
No.
It's not good to trust the politician.
No. I am not saying.
Wait. Sorry to cut you short.
No, you are right.
Let me help you and put Silas in the right
They
perspective.
can just have said that.
Let him understand. No, but Silas, wait. Understand what Nigerians are saying. Most Nigerians who are skeptical are worried over this sudden change, because some of them are thinking that maybe the senators have gone to find a way of manipulating results, even with the e-transmission of results. And after discovering that there's a way of manipulating the process, even with the e-transmission of results, that is why they now like, let's go ahead. If we can do this, why not? Oh yeah, let's go. E-transmission of results. After all, there is a way of manipulating it. And some Nigerians are suspecting because they feel politicians are selfish. So at the end of the day, for them to have suddenly changed their mind, is either that they would have actually gone to do research and found out that there are ways of also manipulating election results, even with the e-transmission process.
Well,
Think about that.
Yes, that is also it bears thinking about. There's always a conspiracy theory in many things, political and governmental. Okay, so let's not remove that one completely. But I don't know. I'm beginning to think that maybe I'm wrong to trust INEC because of their consistency. Okay, if you look at the elections INEC has conducted over the time, they have tried, even with all the traction for politicians and for politics itself, to have an election that's fair and fair. Those sometimes the politicians use their political clout to, but always, there's an intent to do an election. Fine. I think that if INEC is confident of deploying this technology, they'll also be confident of what? Blocking the loophole for these same politicians that are posing them to manipulate the system. Of course, there'll be in every 12 there's a Judas. There could be people within the INEC setup who can be bought over. But if they have a foolproof, I believe that because of the kind of skepticism that comes from the Senate, other individuals about interpretation, the INEC has a duty to check their standards, the parameters, to make sure that the positions are always desperate. That those positions will not try to sabotage their system, because if this information is hanging on the credibility of INEC. If they say they want this, they can do this, and at the end of the day, this system, this process is upstaged by individuals. It will be on INEC that they failed to maintain the system that they said is foolproof. But so they have a duty to make sure that it's also have a duty to be vigilant to watch and see that this process is not manipulated the way it says so.
Exactly.
So everybody has to be on watch. It's not
Exactly.
end them yet.
Exactly.
It's still developing.
That reminds me of something. I think somebody was trying to point out something here. That in the reports in the paper today, what he saw was from the new amendment. What he saw was being reported was transfer instead of transmission. So he said he hoped that transfer and transmission mean the same thing in this context, because at the end of the day, you have to prove that idea of the change of words. So he was saying, is it the media that changed it from transmission to transfer, or it is the way the thing is in the new bill passed by the lawmaker? He was not trying to say, but what he's trying to say is that it's
Is it okay
transfer and
for-
transmission
for-
the same thing. Because in that context, one has to understand that transfer and transmission, if they are not the same thing, that would be another clause that might be suffering from serious equivocation. At the end of the day, it will not lead to a
No,
situation where
I think it is pretty clear what the law intends, what the bill intends is transmission of results.
of course.
From
And I
the
think-
voting point
Yes,
to the
central.
central.
Yes. I
collecting
think
place.
it is pretty clear. Any attempts to coin an expression that does not
Transfer,
Convey that
carry the
transmission.
spirit of what is intended
Mm.
will be malicious and mischievous. But again, let me just go back a bit on a few things. I think INEC has shown good faith. It has said to Nigerians, we have what it takes to do this. But my problem lies with, because there are two key institutions involved in this whole process now. The NCC. The NCC has a role to play one way or another, because it has to do with telecoms operations and all of the technical things. For an institution that has not been too positive towards this process, it will be expedient, because it is one thing to see. It depends on how you see a challenge. You can either see the challenge as an opportunity to grow or an opportunity to shrink back. My concern with the NCC was that this would have provided them an opportunity to grow, to improve on facility, to upgrade, and to make this thing work. Because the benefits of having e-transmission totally outweigh the challenges of not having it
At all.
the way of continuing of having status quo continue.
Yes.
The impact of that alone
Because we
and
cannot,
what it
we-
does
we
to our democratic process is too heavy
cannot continue.
compared to what it will cost to have e-transmission happen.
We cannot continue
So-
to be transmitting results manually when other countries have developed to the extent of using technologies in advancing most of their.
That is where my concern.
Mm,
That is where my concern lie. And so, as much as INEC has said it wants to do this, it's shown a very progressive stand. I would want to see the NCC also do the same thing.
Yes.
I want to see other institutions rallying around INEC. If they have to meet the president again, if they have to meet the National Assembly for them to approve funds to fast track this process, why not? That is the kind of discussion I expected we'll be having at this point.
Well,
Not whether we can do it or not. But again, like I said, this is a process. Now that the National Assembly appears to have done most of its part, of course, the harmonization team will do their work. And from the look of things, I think they are almost at par now. Both chambers are almost at par. So we shouldn't expect that anybody will do something different, contrary on this issue. The challenge now comes to the president. This will be coming to his table soon. There's a history or there's a record since he became president of how electoral amendments have not gone too smoothly when it came to him. We've had excuses, oh, he said this, he said that, about 3 or 4 times where this process came. This is an opportunity for him, to stamp his name in gold when it comes to the electioneering process. This is an opportunity
Electoral process.
Electoral process, rather. This is an opportunity for him to do so. In the last couple of days, he has been talking about leaving a legacy. Just had a mid-term thing with his ministers. So one would expect that he would use this opportunity to stamp his legacy and put his name in gold, so that when we mention the democratic process in Nigeria, at least he will have his name in there as well.
Well, that is the much we can take for today's edition of the Big Issue. And of course, thank you, Chibuzo, for this very wonderful interrogation and analysis. Silas. And of course, we'll thank you, our viewer, for keeping tab with us out there. I hope it was a very wonderful time in here, and we were able to address the issue the way it is. Once again, I am your regular host, George Jagba. Join us same time tomorrow for another edition of the Big Issue. Have a wonderful day.